Oh, good morning, everyone. I'm Cecilia Harry. I'm with the Colorado Springs Chamber and EDC. I serve the organization in the role of Chief Economic Development Officer, and I wanted to thank you for joining us for today's Chamber Connect with the topic of back to work, job search strategy in a virtual world. We will be here until 1 p.m. today, and we have three main topic areas with a 10-minute Q&A session in between each topic. And this is an interactive session, so we really encourage you to ask questions and participate. Please post your questions in the chat to everyone or to our host, Emma Mitchell, and they will be asked in the order that they are received. We are also recording this presentation, and it will be available to the public to view by next week. We have a request for you to rename yourself within the Zoom application with your name and your company name. This will help us draw a winner for a special prize, and the renaming of yourself in the Zoom helps us identify the winner. So before we jump in, I just have a couple of announcements related to the Chamber and EDC. One area of interest for the greater community that the Chamber and EDC played a role in is a new restaurant variance that has been introduced for El Paso County to allow the restaurant community to begin to offer in-house or dine-in services again. The variance has significant detail to it, but some of the highlights of interest that the restaurant community is working toward accommodating is keeping 6 feet between all customers and capping capacity of their facility to either 50 customers, that's 50, or 50% capacity, that's also 50, whichever of those two numbers ends up being the smaller of the two. There are also recommendations for these restaurants to keep track of folks related to reservations, arrival times, and departures to help with contact tracing should there be a need with any cases being reported tied to any customers serving their facility. So we're happy to answer more questions or point you to the right experts in the community related to that restaurant variance. And we really encourage you to support that really important business sector of our community as you feel comfortable in the coming days and weeks. Also, next week, there will be no Chamber Connect on May 28th because it's a holiday week. So please look ahead to the next Chamber Connect on June 4th. And just in time for today's topic related to job search strategy, the Chamber and EDC has a new page on our website for job searches. And it has links to government websites, blogs, and companies that are hiring. So check out our chat feed in this Zoom meeting for a link to that new web page that we have just unveiled. And now, to get us started into the program, I'm going to introduce Jenny Vinatieri from BBSI. BBSI is the sponsor of this Chamber Connect. Welcome, Jenny.
Hi, thank you. Thank you so much, and thanks for everybody joining the call. BBSI we're a local affordable solution for small to mid-sized businesses. We advocate for the business owners in areas such as HR, payroll, workers' compensation, talent acquisition. So if you have any needs in those areas or any questions related to those areas, just feel free to reach out, and we'd love to meet with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. And now, without further ado, let's jump into our program. Again, today's topic is back to work, job search strategy in a virtual world. And I am pleased to introduce to you our moderator today, Mr. Kevin Kokinda. Kevin, welcome.
So, can everybody hear me? Everybody can hear me okay? Okay. Hi, my name is Kevin Kokinda. I'm the owner of Resumetics Career Strategy and Solutions, and also the host of the Career Maverick podcast on krdo.com. So real quick, I'm just going to run through the agenda. Cecilia mentioned what it's going to entail, but I thought I'd go into it just a little bit definitively. We'll spend 20 minutes talking about resume and cover letter restructuring, personal branding, and interviewing. We'll spend 20 minutes on each one. There'll be a Q&A after each one for about 10 minutes that Emma will facilitate. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our very talented panelists. They're going to spend about 30 seconds telling y'all a little bit about each other. I'd like to start with Al Smith. Hello?
Hello, everyone. This is Al Maxwell from the Pikes Peak Workforce Center. Welcome to our chat for today. I am a trainer with the Pikes Peak Workforce Center, and I'm happy to be here.
Next, I'd like to introduce Richard Gagne.
Hello, everyone. I'm Richard Gagne. I work over at Mount Carmel Veteran Service Center. I'm a peer navigator. I help with transitioning service members, their spouses, and their family in transitioning from the military service.
And next, I'd like to introduce Sarah Silva. I hope I got the last name right. Vote for two.
You did. Thanks, Kevin. Welcome, everyone. I'm Sarah Silva. I'm the talent scout at the T-Mobile Customer Experience Center here in Colorado Springs. So I work hiring amazing people to take care of our customers. And I have about 15 years of recruiting experience here in Colorado Springs.
Last but not least, we have Dr. Megan Steep.
Thank you, Kevin. So my name is Dr. Megan Stead. I'm the Assistant Dean for External Relations in the UCCS College of Business. And I have over 15 years of career services experience with students and transitioning military veterans and just a wide range of helping individuals find jobs. And in my role, I oversee 4 different departments, but most pertinent to this conversation is our Career Development Center, where we help students transition from their college careers into their professional careers. And happy to speak with you all today.
Kevin, you're muted.
Trying to walk and chew gum at the same time here. So Al, you work over at the Pikes Peak Workforce Center, and I know that you spend a lot of time working with individuals in all areas regarding their resumes. But when you're talking to clients, what type of do's and don'ts, myths, and things as far as keywords that you always like to suggest to those individuals?
Includes a couple of things. I want to talk about 8 points in particular. The first one is that you must tailor target your resume. You must tailor your target to what the position description is asking for. The employer wants a person with certain types of skills and experience, and guess what? They've already laid that out in the position on the position description. So please make sure that you're tailored and targeting. 2, as you're writing your resume, make sure that you are using keywords. Throughout the position description, you will see that there are keywords mentioned, and you should incorporate those keywords into your resume. Point number 3, you must tone down your resume. So here's what I mean by that. You've got to tone down your resume. Some of you probably have 20, 30, maybe 45 years experience. Please don't put 45 years experience on your resume. That's just too much for the employer to take a look at. And speaking of toning down, your resume should be at least 1 to 2 pages, no more. You can fit around 10 to 15 years of experience on your resume to include all of the items that the employer is looking for. Again, your reference point is the position description. Point number 4, you want to write accomplishment statements. When you write accomplishment statement, one technique or one method that you can use is called the STAR method. S-T-A-R. The S stands for situation, the T stands for task, the A stands for action, and the R stands for results. So if you put them all together, you're going to tell them the situation that you were in. You're going to also tell them about the task that you did, what action you took, and lastly, the results of the actions that you took in that situation. Now, you're probably thinking, that's a lot. But once you've written it out initially, then you will get an idea of where you need to trim that down to make your accomplishment statement hard-hitting and impactful so that the employer can see right off the bat what they're looking for. As you're writing your accomplishment statements, you do want to include keywords like I mentioned before, but you also want to throw in those things that's going to catch their eye, like use numbers and percentages, dollar signs, hours, so forth and so on, based on what you saw in the position description. Point number 5, follow the instructions on the PD. If the instruction says they want you to upload your information, meaning your resume, maybe your references, whatever the instruction says, please make sure you follow it to a T. Now the do's and don'ts. I have 2 for you. 1, make sure that you do not include your social security number or a picture on your resume. Also, please write a cover letter. And I know Sarah's going to talk a little bit more about a cover letter, so I'm not going to get into the details, but I will encourage you to write a cover letter. It will make a difference. That's all I have for you, Kevin.
Kevin, you're muted again.
There we go. Thanks, Al. Hey, real quick, what's your take on the templated formats? When you're instructing individuals to put these together, is there a particular, we always say templates is a bad word. What's your take on that?
My take on that, Kevin, is yes, templates are bad words. So here's the deal. Employers are using what's called the applicant tracking system, better known as the ATS, and there are multiple applicant tracking systems out there that they're using. You probably won't have any idea of which one they're using, and guess what? Employers can actually set these applicant tracking systems up to however they want to format that. So the key for you is this: to get past the gatekeeper, which is the applicant tracking system. What you want to do is don't use a template, because some of the applicant tracking systems may totally wipe out your resume and make it look as you did not even upload it up into the system. So I usually encourage folks, just stick with the basic Microsoft Word. You can create a 1 to 2 great page resume for the employer to take a look at.
And you definitely recommend keeping it at a maximum of 2 pages.
A maximum of 2 page. And so for that, if you're just coming out of college, perhaps you have no experience, maybe a 1-pager and you can list some items. And I know we have a person on our panel that's going to actually talk about that, and I think it's Megan. But if you've been in the workforce and you have experience, it's important that I want you to think about this as you're writing your resume. Put the employer's hat on yourself and think about it. Would you as an employer want to read more than 2 pages? Would you want to read 5 pages? Would you want to read 6 pages? I think not. So if you put yourself in the employer's position as you're crafting your resume, then I think you'll have better success.
All right. Al, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm going to talk to Rich and have him go over my favorite resumes, the federal resumes. Rich, you spend a lot of time working with service members, veterans, those that are transitioning from the military to civilian sector. What type of insight and advice can you give on the federal resumes, usjobs.org, and just the best practice and how to apply on those sites?
Yes, Kevin. So a couple things that we do is sitting down with the transitioning service member is tell them, one, they're going to have 2 resumes. They're going to need a civilian resume because there's going to be some jobs out there that they're going to be interested, such as a Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, or Raytheon. And then there's going to be some of those jobs that are on the military installations that are government. You cannot apply to a federal job with a 2-page resume, and you cannot apply to a normal civilian job with a federal resume because you're probably not going to be looked at either one. So really it's sitting down, like Al said before, you have to target and you have to tailor your resume. So I'll just talk, for instance, as a logistician. If you're a logistician in logistics and that's the job field you're trying to get into, and you apply at 3 different companies, you're going to have to tailor your resume 3 different ways because those job recs are going to be written differently. Number 1 priority at one job will be different priority at another job. If you don't put them in order, then you're probably not going to get looked at, or you may be in a different pile. The federal resume is going to be a lot longer. You're going to go chronological. It's going to be that 5 to 10 page resume, putting all your information that covers everything that you've done according to the job that you're applying to. In the federal resume side, you're going to have KSAs, skills, knowledge, skills, and ability, and your abilities. You're going to have to look in that job rec to see what they're looking for. I think the problem that I see with most of our service members leaving, they just look at the job on USA Jobs and it says analyst, and they say, yep, that's me, but they never go down to the to OPM Gov to go look at all those skills that are written out and write them out. If you don't do that, you're not giving yourself a chance at being looked at, and you'll never make it past that first round. So really, it's that targeting.
Okay. Yeah, I know that and as far as the usjobs.org, the site itself, what kind of recommendations do you make? I usually tell my clients that the resume builder that's on there is usually one of the more effective ways to do it. You could send your resume out as just a separate attachment, but I've had experts tell me that you really, although it's tedious, you want to go in and import the information, do those 1,000-word answers, and they don't want to see attached resume for it. So what's your thoughts on that?
That's correct. So what's good is to probably build that master on a Word document so that you have it as a tool that you can pull from. But yes, go on there and go through the applying instructions, because they're different at each one, and just answer those questions in depth. Where it asks, you know, tell me about a time where you did this, this, and this, then you need to go, well, when I was in this position during this time frame, it outlines these details, and then put those details again in that answer, and then you go to the next one, and you're going to have to do that. It is a tedious project,
but I know that it's pretty effective, and they encourage you to definitely use it. So I always tell my clients too, and you hit it right on the head, take that Microsoft Word, it's easy to import, as it is all job platforms, and just, you know, put it in there, and I think you'll have a lot better success rate using that resume builder template they use in that site. So I'm going to go ahead and move over and ask Megan. Megan, you work with a lot of the entry-level students and also non-traditional students, but a lot of individuals that are either going into the workforce for the first time, or maybe they are transitioning into a different career, but you know, it is a little bit different in terms of the entry-level resume or for internships. What kind of insight can you provide everyone on individuals who have college students or individuals that are in school that are looking for that first-time job or internship?
Yeah, happy to help with that. So I always tell my students to focus on the skill set that a job wants, right? And so especially if individuals don't have a lot of experience, if they're coming out with, you know, maybe they're looking at a customer service role or entry-level role at an organization and they don't have that business experience yet, what transferable skills do you have from your other jobs? So like I'll talk to students who have maybe worked in the food industry and talk about their customer service skills and what knowledge they gained in terms of customer interactions and how that relates to the position they're applying for. So, and that's true for transitioning individuals as well, right? If you've been in a career field for a while and now you're making a change, it's focusing on those transferable skills, and we all have them. And I'll share a little personal example. I went from transitioning military veterans into transitioning college students, which is different, right? They're different things, but the skill set is still, the basic skill set is still the same, having that individual communication and kind of one-on-one support. And I was able to really focus on that. But on my resume, when I was applying for the role to work with students, I went back through and changed where it said I had been working with military veterans and just changed the language to students to match what, because all the military veterans I was working with were students at the time. They were going through some kind of program. So just making sure that your language is consistent to what the job is looking for. And, you know, I may have been working, if I was going to apply for a military-oriented organization, I would have kept helping transitioning military veterans instead of changing that to students. So just being mindful of the language. But I think it all goes back just to those transferable skills, what's needed for a position and how you can highlight it. And for individuals who don't have a lot of experience, like I see students a lot overlook their education, right? What did you do in your classes? What kind of projects did you complete? Did you do any volunteer work? And maybe if you don't have experience in your area, is there a nonprofit you can volunteer with to kind of get that experience? Because you can put all of that on your resume. A common mistake I see people make is they don't understand that with the volunteer work or with any kind of coursework that you've completed, you can put that on your resume as experience if it relates to the job. And that is completely acceptable. And so a lot of people on paper, it looks like they're not qualified for a position that they really are qualified for because they haven't either focused on the transferable skills or they haven't pulled in some of the coursework or the volunteer work that they've done in that area.
Great. That is awesome information. And I'm going to end this session here with Sarah, who, we've been talking a little bit about the different types of resumes, but having Sarah's insight, she's working in talent acquisition. So you review these in addition to the cover letters. So would really like to hear your opinion on, what you look for when you see these resumes coming across your desk, as well as the cover letter. We did talk about that. So if you could share some insight on, what makes a candidate stand out in your opinion and what you think other talent acquisition managers view as a qualified candidate.
See, that's what happens when you're muted. Definitely. So, I do review thousands of resumes. And I would say, just mirroring everything that everybody else said, that watch the job description and make sure that the details that you're putting in your resume match the job description, because if you don't, that's a surefire way to get yourself kicked out right away, even if you have the qualifications, because you're not demonstrating that in your resume. So I would make sure you're using strong words and really conveying why you're the best candidate. The top half of your resume is really where you want to put solid landscape into, to making sure that you show in that, because as a recruiter, you're not spending 5 minutes per resume. You're spending just a few seconds. And cover letters, I think resumes and cover letters are both, I tell everybody, they're an art, not a science. So every single person's going to have their own opinion on what makes it great. And I think, I'm kind of going to contradict Al a little bit. I think it depends. Cover letters, there's a lot. You could talk to 5 different people and they'll all give you a different opinion on whether you should have a cover letter or not. Some companies require cover letters, some don't. And I think in large part, it may depend on what industry you're looking for, as well as where you're at in your career, whether you want to have a cover letter or not. There are a million resources online that you can look at as far as pros and cons of cover letters. And I would say the pro is it really gives you an opportunity to expand on your resume. So if you are someone who maybe has 30 years of experience and you're trying to keep your resume to 1 page, a cover letter might be great for you because it gives you an opportunity to showcase, hey, here's a little bit more detail about my career and why I'm the best fit for your job. But if you're newer in your career, or maybe you're a little worried about your written skills, then maybe you don't want to do a cover letter. For the majority of people I work with, I tell them don't do a cover letter, because if you don't have that cover letter matching the same consistency with your resume, it could make you look like, that there are things that are false on one or the other. And it just leaves up too much room for interpretation that could get you kicked out. So I think, again, it depends on where you're at in the career. But if you are going to do a cover letter, I would say it definitely needs to be 1 page, very formal, professional business type letter addressed to who you're trying to get it to. Make sure you know the company's objective and what they're looking for, so that you can say not only what they're looking for in the job description, but as a company. If they're a company that's built on family values, you want to highlight that in your resume, how you bring those same values to their company. So I would just say, if you're going to do a cover letter, make sure that everything about it conveys how you're a fit for their company as well as that position. Oh, I think you're on mute.
Got me again, got me. Thanks, Sarah. You really have to deflect to the experts who spend the time to look at these, because at the end of the day, you are influencing them. So we're going to take 10 minutes. Emma's going to go ahead and get some questions here. We're going to spend about 10 minutes Q&A on that, and then we're going to move into personal branding.
We actually haven't had any questions yet, so we can
questions?
move. I know. So we can move on to the next segment, and then we can add on some time at the end if there's more questions.
Okay. Well,
actually, Kevin, I do have a question. So we want to do a raffle. So can you give me a 2-digit number, and we will count in our own way and pick a winner?
So I'm going to give you a 2-digit number right now.
Yes, please.
Okay. 15.
15? Okay, perfect.
15.
Actually, okay. And then we actually did get a question. I would like to know if reference letters are helpful in attaching to the resume.
A reference letter, that's kind of falls in line with the, references available upon request. I think like the cover letter, if they're asking for it, then, you should. I've never really come across a reference letter before. And what we're going to do, we're going to talk about this here in just a minute in terms of ways that, some of the best ways that you could put references and recommendations on it. Will I say that it doesn't hurt? Of course it doesn't hurt. I suggest maybe having it prepared, and as you're talking to that individual in the interviewing process, that might be a good idea to, include that. Panelists, what do you think? What are your thoughts on that?
I have one. If you do, I would say only send it in upon request. But the second part to that is make sure that if you have 3 references on there, you reach out to those 3 references and let them know that you're applying to a position so that they're aware, because you don't want to catch your reference blindsided. And it may be somebody that you trust, but maybe it's not on the other end of the receiving saying that, yeah, this is a good candidate for the job. So just make sure you communicate with those people that you have so that helps you instead of prevents you from getting it.
I would also add to that, like, I do think if they ask for it, obviously include it. If they don't ask for it, it's certainly optional. But if you are going to submit it, make sure, I always tell students to try to personalize that reference letter just like you would a cover letter. Like, make sure that you reach out to your references and say, could you write me a letter of recommendation for this very specific position? Because that's a lot stronger than a generic reference letter that you're just handing out to everybody. So if your references are willing to write you a specific letter for a job, that's always more valuable. And what I always recommend students do is write a template for them. Write the letter of recommendation yourself, email it for that specific job, email your reference and say, hey, would you mind, I wrote a template for you. I mean, these people are busy, so that's the best thing you can do. This is what I'd like you to say about me, if you're willing to say these nice things about me. And then they can sign it and submit it for that specific position. Because general recommendation letters, especially if they're a couple years old, like if it's somebody who wrote you a recommendation 2-3 years ago and it's dated like it's 2 or 3 years ago and it's very generic, there's not a lot of value to that.
I agree. Those are some great insights. Al, do you have anything to share on that?
No, I think everybody said it, ditto to what everybody said.
All right, well, cool. Well, then we're going to move into the next segment here.
Wait,
Personal
I got
branding.
a couple.
I'm sorry.
questions.
I'm sorry.
So, is there such a thing as adding too many positive references, and what's the magic number?
Well, generally the rule of thumb is 3. A lot of times as you're filling out an application process, there's, give us 3, references that we can call. So that's, as a rule of thumb, that's kind of where I like to cap it at. I haven't seen very many situations where they want more than that, unless there's anyone else that can share a story. But generally 3 is the minimum and the maximum.
I've seen up to 8 for some of the positions our students are applying for. So however many they ask you for, but I would just recommend having multiple references in different areas. Like especially if you're interested in multiple industries, just make sure that you have, it goes back to making sure that your references kind of relate to the position and can talk about your ability to do that particular job. So I wouldn't say just have 3 references and that's what you use for every job. I would say if you have 10 plus references that are positive references for you, you might not submit them for every position, right? You're going to pick and choose which one fits best with which role. But whatever they ask for, that would be my answer to that.
The only thing that I would add to that, Kevin, is that if you have multiple references, I think it's great, especially if you're going into different industries like Megan just said. One of the things that I would encourage folks to do is to loop your references into your process. Let them know, like Rich said, that, hey, I've applied for this job, but maybe take it a step further by sending them the job posting. Send them the job posting, and if you trust them, like someone mentioned earlier, send them a copy of your resume and have them take a look at that. Because if you are going to use them as a reference, if you say you got the interview and you're using them as a reference, what better way to actually coach them to talk about your skills and experiences? So loop them in the process and send them a copy of your resume and send them a copy of the job posting so they can see actually what you applied for.
Great insights, great insights. I think I saw another question.
There's a couple more. There's a couple more. Okay, does doing a follow-up to a hiring official do anything positive if you don't get contacted by HR after submitting an application?
Well, I always think that if you have the opportunity to know who that individual is, and sometimes when you are online, they don't tell you who it is. You're submitting your stuff, but there's no contact person. Now with LinkedIn, depending on what type of a premium edition you have, you can go ahead and follow up with that. If at all possible, if you know who you sent that information to, I generally tell them, if you haven't heard anything in about a week, there's nothing wrong with being proactive and saying, hey, I was just following up to see, where my resume was at. I think it's a professional courtesy to that job seeker, and I think it shows initiative. Anyone else?
Yeah, I would agree. I would say definitely, like you said, if you haven't heard back from the company in a week, they owe you some kind of response. So if you know who that person is, it's definitely appropriate to professionally reach out and ask for a status update. I would just caution not to call every day, through the whole process, because then you get a little bit of a different label that you might not want.
Now, I do run in this from time to time. If you have individuals that are working with recruiters, and it's kind of this where the posting is out there live, so that individual, someone can either apply via the posting or work with the recruiter. Now, I know that is a professional courtesy if they're working with the recruiter and they don't hear back. Sometimes a job candidate might want to say, well, I'm just going to go try to reach out to the human resource person instead of the recruiter. Now, I always tell my clients, you should always work with the recruiter first, and then if you find that you're being ghosted or whatever, cross that bridge, then you get to it. We got a couple minutes here if anyone would like to piggyback on that. No, nothing? Crickets?
There's two more questions. I think we have time for one more. When moving from freelance to a full-time gig, how do you list that work on your resume?
Oh, I know we all probably run into that quite a bit. The freelance, in my opinion, you can call it freelance, you call it gig work. At the end of the day, it's still contracted work. So I tell my clients, depending on, if the contracted work is done pretty regularly, or if you're a business owner, and if that's the case, there's nothing wrong with having an entrepreneurial spirit or ownership mentality. But, again, depending on the situation, like on the resumes that I'll do, I might put contracted instead of freelance. It just depends on if that individual, again, is being hired by a company or just doing the work themselves. Were there any other questions out there?
So this question was posed to Megan. Would you please share how to best show skills for posting at UCCS if you do not have an educational background, but you do have a business background?
Sure. So I've sat on several hiring committees at the university. We're all the staff and faculty, we are all very involved in the hiring process. So we do all of our hiring by committee. And I would say, we hire people from the business sector all the time. So you don't necessarily have to have an education background to work at the university, but you do need to meet the minimum qualifications for the position. And you need to make it easy for us to be able to identify that you meet those minimum qualifications. So I'll give you a little insight into the hiring process at the university, and I think it's very similar to what others experience. There's a series of questions in our applicant tracking system that will say, do you have a bachelor's degree? Yes or no. Do you have 5 years of experience as an administrative assistant? Yes or no? Those are our screening questions. So that's the minimum that you have to even qualify for it. So if you have to answer no to any one of those questions, then you're automatically going to be screened out. So make sure that you're only spending time applying for the positions where you can answer yes to every single one of those questions. The other thing I would say is we see applicants that go through and answer yes to those questions when we can't actually verify on the resume or through the cover letter that they do meet that qualification. So if you answer yes, make sure that you showcase those particular skills. So that's where I would focus on those yes, no screening questions. Make it very evident in your resume that you meet those requirements. And so what I tell individuals to do is actually call out in your cover letter, this position requires 5 years of experience as an administrative assistant. I have over 10 years of experience in these variety of roles. So just make it very easy for us to find that, because there's going to be a committee who is evaluating the cover letter, looking at the resume, and we essentially have an Excel spreadsheet where we rate you. We give you a numeric rating on all the categories that are pulled from the minimum and the preferred qualifications. So you have to meet the minimum to even make it to that level. And then if you have the preferred, you'll get a higher numeric value. And that's how we determine who gets brought on for an interview. We start looking at those numeric values, and you usually see a pretty clear cutoff point. There's usually like people will score 30 and above, and then there's a group of like 15 and below. So we find a cutoff point and invite those people for phone interviews. So make it easy for us. That would be my biggest recommendation to you. Make sure you meet the minimum qualifications and highlight exactly how you meet those qualifications for minimum and preferred. I know some employers, they have the qualifications out there, and I've heard many people say, well, I just went ahead and applied because it might happen anyway. Maybe they'd be willing to hire me anyway. I can tell you at the university, it does not work that way. If you do not meet those minimum qualifications, you will not move on. So I just don't recommend spending your time and energy on any of the positions where you're like, well, I meet all but one of the minimum qualifications. It doesn't matter. You won't be considered. So it's harsh, but I'm just going to be very, very honest with you so you don't waste time.
Great info, Megan. And, I try to tell my clients, these organizations, they lay it out for you to play it out. They're basically telling you right there what you're looking at. You're basically you just have to connect the dots. And for those that don't want to be diligent and just want to, throw it out there and, see if it sticks, well, more times than not, they're not even going to get, a call back at all. That they'll get the auto rejection letter. And, without getting into the whole algorithms and the grading and all of that, I do tell my clients, look, they set parameters, they set filters, they set a criteria for what they're looking for. If you don't meet it, high probability they're not going to call you, and why should they? So great stuff, Megan.